As we know, Auditor General Karen Hogan's twin reports on the federal government's COVID-19 response came out a couple of hours ago, and Hogan gave Ottawa mixed reviews. She said that while the government was successful in securing vaccines, the Public Health Agency of Canada did not do enough to minimize waste.
The Public Health Agency of Canada's efforts to minimize wastage were unsuccessful. By the end of May 2022, Canada had 32.5 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines, estimated to be worth about $1 billion in federal, provincial, and territorial inventories. Another 50.6 million doses were deemed surplus and offered for donation.
Okay, so for more on all of this, we do want to bring in the CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian. You know, there were two essential aspects that were really looked at here. That was whether or not the vaccine rollout was effective and efficient and whether or not the distribution of benefits was. Let's take a look at the vaccine rollout first. And we heard from the Auditor General that there was a lot of doses that were essentially wasted.
That's correct, Arthi. So we just heard her mention that 50.6 million in surplus number for vaccines acquired by the Government of Canada. So that was by the end of May of this year that amount was in storage. Now, she did recognize that part of that was donated. 15 million doses did go out to various countries that were in need of vaccines through donations programs. Some 21 million, though, she said, could still expire because they haven't been donated yet, and some 13.6 million did expire. Now, she also is recognizing, though, that the government did have to kind of rush out to get as many vaccines as possible and was successful in acquiring enough so that any Canadian who wanted one could receive one, but then there were issues with the follow-ups to that. Have a listen to what she had to say.
In my view, the approach that the government took to enter into advance purchase agreements was a prudent one. They knew that that would result in excess vaccines or surplus vaccines being available, which is why there was a commitment to make donations. But there again, so many countries were trying to donate, and that market saturated, resulting in the Canadian government not being as successful as they could. But in my view, it was a prudent approach given all the uncertainty back in 2020, and now we're able to look back and see the results of those decisions.
Part of the issue, she says, is data sharing between all the different jurisdictions that exist within Canada. So we do know, for example, Arthi, that some 80% of Canadians have received at least 2 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine, and that's thanks to the federal government communicating with provinces and territories about that kind of information and asking what's going on in your jurisdiction. But the issue, Hogan says, is that that kind of data sharing was not set up at the beginning of the pandemic, and there is still some stuff missing there. So the information that, for example, the Public Health Agency of Canada gets from provinces and territories, well, it's not allowed to share it across different federal departments within Canada. It's also not allowed to share that with the World Health Organization. So she's flagging that this is still an issue, and she's saying, well, we're probably going to have another pandemic at some point, and this should get fixed before then.
And the second area that was investigated by the Auditor General was the distribution of pandemic relief payments to individuals. And it was found that there was really billions of dollars that went to ineligible recipients, and even billions more that still needs to be investigated because it may have gone to ineligible recipients. So tell us a little bit about that.
So do keep in mind that this is over a total of $210 billion in pandemic payments that the Government of Canada has issued, whether that is to individuals through, say, the CERB program, or to businesses to help pay their employees through the Canada Emergency Wages Subsidy. That being said, yes, Karen Hogan is flagging that the Canadian government overpaid $4.6 billion and recuperated some $2.3 billion. And also that some 27 billion more could have been overpaid. Now, the bulk of that, more than half of that, is through the Canada Emergency Wages Subsidy Program. Hogan's concern is that the government is running out of time to recuperate that money. Now, have a bit more of a listen to what she had to say.
when it comes to the businesses, there was very little information that was collected on a monthly basis. And so without post-payment verification, it would be almost impossible to know the ability to recover or not, or even to identify with greater certainty what went to ineligible businesses, which is why much more rigorous post-payment work is needed from the government.
We've seen some response from the federal government already to some of these criticisms and recommendations. It's largely accepting most of them, but on that issue of overpayment, it's saying that it may just not be cost effective for the Canada Revenue Agency to now go after people who may have been paid by mistake. I will also point out that Hogan was asked a couple of times during the news conference, do you think this was an issue of fraud or criminality versus Canadians, say, just ticking the wrong box when they were applying for these programs? She did not want to weigh in on that. She did say she found that whenever the CRA did detect fraud, they properly referred that to authorities and let them investigate the matter, Arthi.
Thanks for this, Rafi. That is the CBC's Rafi Boudjikanian in Ottawa.